Hey everybody, this is Jackie Miller, your host of Out of Crazy Town. I want to announce my new 8-week program called Freedom and Flourish. It is the only program focused on escaping and thriving from post-separation abuse. If you no longer want to be at the mercy of emotional triggers and develop healthy coping mechanisms, Freedom and Flourish will help you if you feel you're locked in a cycle of control and manipulation and you can't move on with your life, or your world is filled with never-ending drama or harassment. Sign up for Freedom and Flourish today. It starts September 9th. You can go to JackieMillerCoaching.com/break free. Welcome to Out of Crazy Town, your guide to divorcing a narcissist. I'm Jackie Miller. Today's guest, Dr. Peter Salerno, is a doctor of psychology and an award-winning author who specializes in treating trauma that results from abusive and manipulative relationships. Today, Dr. Salerno and I talk about one of his books called The Belief Equation, as well as his newest book, The Nature and Nurture of Narcissism. Join us as we discuss how abusive relationships often create negative beliefs that we hold about ourselves. We talk about how to overcome this by using our thoughts and emotions to create a new set of beliefs that can lead to a happier and more fulfilled version of you. In short, Dr. Peter Salerno is going to help us solve the belief equation. Welcome, Dr. Peter Salerno. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm really excited about our topic today. Welcome to Out of Crazy Town, your guide to divorcing a narcissist.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
This is fantastic. One of the things I love about doing a podcast is I love to research in general. And so I'm always researching guests and topics. And so I stumbled on your content in Instagram, and then I went and was researching books, and I stumbled on The Belief Equation and downloaded it and started reading it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is everything I stand for. This is everything that I'm so excited about when it comes to helping my clients sort of move forward through post-separation abuse. But I have a question for you about this before, and then I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you. When we spoke last week, you made a comment that this book wasn't necessarily written for this demographic. Did I hear you right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. It is so interesting. And when you look at your examples in the book, I guess you can kind of tell that. But in my opinion, it is exactly what this demographic needs in this population and this audience. And so I was just so excited to find it and want to hear more about it. But first, let me tell people a little bit more about you. Not only are you a licensed psychotherapist and award-winning author, you have multiple books that you've written. You're a trauma specialist, clinical supervisor, a coach, a consultant who utilizes empirically validated, which I love about you, science-based approaches to promote healing and self-empowerment. I think that we don't understand enough about what is happening to our bodies, especially when it comes to abuse. Also, you're trained in EMDR. I need to have you back on the show to talk about that. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need a whole episode on EMDR for sure. And then you also have certifications in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, personality disorder treatment. Again, we're going to talk about all the different books that you've written because you've authored on so many topics. I mean, you have trauma in first responders and law enforcement, right? Books on that. But then also early development and attachment, mind-body integration, emotion and cognition. It goes on. And you're in private practice here. You're my neighbor in Southern California. So welcome again to the show.
Thank you so much. Great introduction.
Okay, so the belief equation, you guys. I'm first going to ask you, Dr. Salerno, what is the belief equation?
What is it literally?
What is it literally? Yes, and then we're going to we'll go deeper dive into how your interpretation of it.
The literal belief equation is sort of it's more of a metaphor. It's not an actual equation, but it's essentially when our thoughts and our emotions are not in alignment, what can happen is we can start developing beliefs about ourselves, about others, about the world that are incongruent with our desires, our wants, our needs, our safety, our ability to recover and heal from things, including trauma. And so the equation that needs to be solved, again, just a metaphor, is when our thoughts and our emotions are in perfect alignment long enough in ways that work for us, then we will then generate beliefs that will work for us rather than against us. And those beliefs become kind of imprinted in our autonomic nervous system as automatic beliefs. So we no longer have to think about them. That's just the way that our autopilot's going to run. And so the entire book is about how to create the beliefs that work for you, that you want to have, that you want to be experiencing automatically, as opposed to the negative beliefs that, or beliefs that you've outgrown, or beliefs that are inaccurate, actually, that might be inhibiting, you along your recovery path, or just in life in general, not getting what you want from life.
Sure. And so first I want to talk about sort of a general idea about beliefs and then get more into, again, like this demographic, this community. But isn't it true that our brains are basically wired to think negative?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
and why is that?
For negativity. We're wired for negativity because before we were civilized, let's say, our intention was to survive, period. So when we have threat responses and we have things that activate stress in our nervous system, those are actually good things because they alerted us to potential danger or real danger, to potential threat or real threat. And so it was a good thing a long time ago to be negative in the sense that you were always anticipating something bad happening, because if you didn't anticipate something bad happening, something bad would happen and you wouldn't be ready for it. And that bad thing would typically mean death. You'd get killed by a wild animal, or so it was important for us to literally be preoccupied with what could possibly go wrong just in order to survive physically.
That's amazing. And, I also heard, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Tara Swart, but she had also talked about the negativity that we get wired for, coming back from the caveman days of being super self-aware if, like, say something's wrong with us. And she said there actually was a component of that back in the caveman days too, because if you need to join a clan and be safe inside a cave, right? Because numbers are protective, that if there's something wrong or weird or different about you, even back in caveman days, you might have gotten kicked out of the clan. And so she said there's not only were there the physical protective negativity, sort of wiring, but there was also sort of the social wiring, even that all leads up to us being wired for negativity, like you said. And here's what I want you to comment on. So here we are walking around your average Joe on the street, and I've heard statistics. What do you, like 70% of our thoughts are negative, 80?
Could be something like that.
Then you get into an abusive relationship. And you are subject to a lot of, degrading comments and actions against you. And so you're sort of set up to start having even more self-doubt or more negative thoughts. And so that piles on top of what, we already just are existing as human. Then you go into post-separation abuse if you leave this relationship, which I want to get into a little bit more. But that is why I felt that this book is actually so great for this population. I mean, would you agree now that that is true?
I do agree. Again, it wasn't my intention, but a little bit of background on me. I wrote that book during a time where I was actually using the book to get out of a situation myself. I didn't publish it until years later. So I had been working on it for a number of years before I even thought of like making it into something that I was going to publish for the public. And I don't mean to disparage anybody who is a therapist or a coach or anyone who has their own methods, but when I was in my situation, all that I learned in school, my degree programs, my doctorate, my master's, and then all that I was learning from therapists and other people trying to help wasn't actually helping me move forward. And so I had to start looking elsewhere. And I started compiling basically this wisdom and these techniques and these things that I tested on myself to see if they would work and help me move forward. And so I presented the book as a kind of a personal empowerment, self-development type of book. But what it really was for me personally was a trauma recovery book. And I never had intended on advertising it that way. But it's interesting that you caught on to that, because that's really that was my manual for survival in a way. So
that is amazing, because I had a similar experience that when I was getting out of a relationship and going through, had suffered a lot of trauma and then continued different trauma after the relationship ended. I was looking for ways to just move forward, like you said. And yes, therapy is extremely important, and all of those things. Everybody should go and get help and support in that arena. But I wanted to know how to move forward. And so we'll get more into this now, because there are sort of everyday, almost simple skills. I don't know, is simple the right word, but basic skill that we can use when it's 11 o'clock at night on a Thursday, and you're not talking to your therapist. And so I want to get into those a little bit, because I don't think that people realize that we do have these tools at our disposal, but we do have to do a little bit of work, right? We do have to dig in. We have to be aware. So how would you start this? Would you say that we need to first start with looking at our beliefs and what they are?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, myself included, before I was kind of diving into this, not only the book, but just the topic in general, there's a lot of beliefs that we don't know we have about ourselves. We have a core belief system. And again, that's kind of a metaphor. It's not like there's a system in our body that's like the nervous system, but we have a core belief system that determines our confirmation biases. It determines things, it determines our predictions. It's like it's in line with our brain, which our brain is pretty much a prediction machine. It wants to ensure certain outcomes. If our beliefs are negative or not working for us, then our brain is going to make predictions and ensure negative outcomes, right? We're going to look for things out in the environment that confirm our beliefs. We don't know we have a lot of these beliefs. So I wanted people to start examining and taking inventory of the beliefs they have so that they can replace them with beliefs that are actually practical and that work for them. And interestingly, everybody that I've ever worked with on this topic, there are, I would say unanimously actually, they have beliefs and they're shocked that they have them and about themselves that are so self-deprecating, self-critical that they didn't have a clue that they thought and believed that about themselves until they either saw a list of these negative beliefs or we started doing, these come out in EMDR because EMDR utilizes beliefs a lot. But that's essentially where to start is taking inventory on what you believe about yourself, what you believe about others, and what you believe about the world. And when you're in a relationship like the ones that we're talking about, like toxic relationships, traumatic, abusive relationships, that makes it even harder because within the context of the relationship, new beliefs develop, either because you were coerced into believing them from your partner, or you just can't figure out what's going on. And so you start blaming yourself and trying to come up with a reason why things are the way they are. So they essentially just kind of like stockpile all these negative beliefs and they're mostly unconscious. So we're not like aware that we're walking around feeling so terrible about ourselves.
Right. And, because there's such a obviously power and control component in abusive relationships, part of the tactic from my perspective, right, is to sort of keep you down and keep you depressed, keep you talking negative self-talk. And awareness is kind of what I'm hearing you say is you have to really do some work initially to become aware of those thoughts and take stock of what you're thinking on a daily basis and what's true and what's not. Do you have any tactics for how you first start to become aware? What can you do to take that first step?
Well, I think I definitely mention in the book just to kind of like make a list of all of the things that you want to believe about yourself. And in doing that, you're actually going to discover what you really believe about yourself. When you see all of your list of wants and desires, the positive beliefs that you think would be wonderful to have. When you see that outside of yourself, whether it's like on paper or writing it on your phone or typing it up, you'll start to notice how true those feel. And most of the time, what we really want to believe about ourselves, especially when we're recovering from a relationship that's like a pathological abuse relationship, or we're going through a stressful time like a high conflict divorce or a separation, or we're being threatened in some way by somebody throughout that process, it's very hard to feel beliefs that you want to have when all of the external world is kind of crashing down on you. So that's where I tell people to start is to focus on what they really want to believe, and then that'll actually reveal what they truly believe about themselves.
That's awesome. I was recently doing sort of a challenge with a group where I asked them to really sit down and think about the most hurtful, painful sort of smear campaign lies or whatever being told about them, as they're moving through this process of post-separation abuse. And it has been more powerful than I ever imagined, because there is this, constant berating of, you're not a good mom or you're not a good parent. Right. And you're the one that causes all the problems and you're, not smart enough and you're not good enough. Yeah. And then trying to create truths that counteract those. But that awareness I know can be so profound, and it sounds simple, but you got to sit down and really do the work. And it's probably painful to really confront those and bring those up as you're trying to do that work. Would you agree?
It's painful, but there's also a lot of resistance from your brain and body because your brain and body don't want you to do new things with your beliefs. They've got it figured out. They want to know exactly how things are going to go today, including your thoughts. So when you start to, this is the problem that everybody runs into, or most people run into when they're trying to start a new diet or even start like a new exercise routine or whatever. Learn something new. Your mind is telling you, well, we are comfortable where we are because it's familiar. You're pulling us out of that. And so there's this push pull when we're trying to even take mental inventory. So it's very painful, but there's also a lot of resistance, and it causes people to either give up prematurely or maybe even become more confused.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That, you said something, two words there that really resonate with me. So comfort and familiar. And I've had this conversation so many times, and even with my own children, your comfort zone is not necessarily comfortable almost ever. It's your familiar zone, and it's just familiar. And you're right. So when you step out of that zone, your body this is how tell me if I'm right on, this is how I explain it to people. Your body goes, okay, I know that wasn't necessarily great where we were, but this is completely unknown. We don't know this, and unknown. I'm right. I'm supposed to alert you that we don't like unknown because we don't know what to do here. So I would like to go back there. So even though that zone is not good, it's familiar. At least I know what's happening there. And so you're right. Your body and your brain put up this resistance to step out of that zone, even if it's not good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because the familiarity is at least predictable, even if it's abusive or it's violent or it's, dangerous, because your body and your mind don't have to gear up for a new threat. They're kind of gearing up for a threat that they already know is coming, which is terrible. But that's how the brain kind of wants to operate. And so we have to intervene on its behalf and start doing things that are uncomfortable enough so that we we can literally switch our autopilot, but it takes a lot. I wouldn't say it takes a lot of work, like hard work, but it definitely takes a lot of effort. It's very simple, but it takes effort, it takes consistency.
Yeah. I want to make one comment and then ask about something that you say in your book. Sure. On that note. So one is, it just comes to mind when we're talking about this too, that how many times it takes someone to leave an abusive relationship, right? And so if you have someone threatening what might happen when you get into that unknown, and then you're already wired basically not to leave and go into the unknown, I mean, that's a double whammy. And so I know we know this, and everyone in this community knows this, but it's worth repeating that it's very hard to leave those relationships because of what you just stated. It's so good, I think, to know what your brain and body are doing, on top of the fact that someone has now placed those possible horrible scenarios in the unknown area. And that's why it's hard to leave.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you say in the book, you have to basically talk yourself into getting fed up to leave. Yeah. How do you talk yourself into getting fed up enough to move into the unknown?
Yeah. So I think what happens with a lot of abuse victims is they're in a constant threat state or fear-based state, which hijacks their nervous system. And a lot of people, they might be going into fight or flight, but more frequently they go into the freeze or appease state, the dorsal vagal shutdown, where you're emotionally paralyzed. And so you can't leave a difficult relationship. You're terrified of what would happen if you do. You're not fully clear when you're in that amount, under that amount of stress and that amount of fear, what the right decision is. You start questioning yourself and doubting yourself. So the main reason that we don't get fed up is because of fear. That's what it is. Fear keeps us in that frozen state. What we need to do is we need to get in touch with our anger, which a lot of people think is an inappropriate response to have. They think that it's irrational. They think that it's inappropriate. They think it's maybe like their abuser is. Totally untrue. Anger is when it's contained and controlled in the way it needs to be, it's not rage. It's not out of control. It's not crazy. It's a very adaptive response to situations like these. And what anger does for us is it actually expands our spatial awareness and makes us able to observe from a distance what's going on. So it brings a lot of clarity. And once you have that clarity and you have the good sense to be pissed off about what's been going on with you, then you start getting really sick of it. And the hardest thing to do, I think, is breaking the barrier from the fear barrier into the anger. But there's ways to do it. And I think in the book, I'm telling people to intentionally get fed up in a way where they imagine themselves getting fed up. Like, just imagine picturing the scenario you're in, and instead of being terrified of it, starting to notice everything that makes you really mad about it. And that kind of can start to help you And we do this in EMDR too, because oftentimes when someone's stuck in a sadness state, like a depressive state, or they're stuck in a fear-based state, usually the thing that starts to come out through the process is anger. It starts to shift and they start going, you know what? I'm just really mad. And I tell them, go with that, go with that, go with that, because that's where you need to be in order to, start getting fed up enough to make decisions. You can't really make those decisions in that fear state. It's too paralyzing.
That is absolutely amazing. And you have just validated me so much because the sort of work and some programs that I'm working on now that are all in this thread, that all are based off the things that you're saying in the belief equation, is what happened as a coach. And then also as somebody who went through an abusive relationship is I was like, God damn it. I'm freaking sick of these guys. Pardon me. I'm going to use the word guys getting away with this shit. Like, this is what happened in the relationship. This is what happened to your brain. This is what happened to your body. This is why you're primed. And I was going to ask you about this later. I might have guest on the show, Dr. Caroline Giroux, a psychiatrist. You've been primed basically during the abusive relationship to be more susceptible to being triggered during post-separation. Right. And damn it.
Yeah.
This is where we have our power. We're trying to get the right attorney. We're hoping for the better judge. We're hoping that minors counsel will be appointed and we'll get the right minors counsel. We're hoping the custody evaluation is going to come out. And I get that we have to operate in all those systems and do the best we can for the best outcome. But what in the hell can we do right now to take our power back? And it is this. And that's why I am like, we're taking our power back. Here we go, people. This is what we're going to do. We're going to get mad. I'm mad. No longer are they taking over our thoughts, our body, and ruining our future. And something that you say in the book about this is, do you want to start now? Do you want to start making a difference now? Do you want to take your life back now? Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, I love that notion of getting mad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
It makes so much sense. Could you tell? Could you tell? It was really funny. I was on a call with Dr. Cochiola and Amy Polacco about their book this morning, a conference call. And she says, Jackie, somebody told me that they really love your podcast. They said that the crazy lady. And I'm like, oh no, is that what they're calling me? She goes, oh no, I meant the crazy town lady podcast. And I'm like, great. Is that what I'm known as now? It's the crazy lady podcast. But now after that rant, I might be. So anyway, I love that notion. And I also want to talk about mindset because you give an example in the book of two people being stuck in traffic. And you look to your right and somebody's having one reaction to it and you look to your left. So can you talk a little bit about you're in two people in the same situation having two different reactions?
Yeah. So we like to, as human beings, I think it's very natural that we project or externalize why something might be happening to us. It's happening, it's out there and we're being affected by it out there. And we forget about our body, the ability to self-regulate. So in the book, I give an example of a woman in a car and she's stuck in traffic and she's using it as an opportunity to just kind of listen to her favorite songs and sing and kind of dance and basically not perceiving it as if she's losing any time or she's stuck at all. She's just kind of making the best out of a situation that isn't fully in her control, but it's also not disturbing her or causing her to be irritable or feel uneasy at all. Contrast that with the guy on the left, and he's, clenching the steering wheel and his face is red, and he's like, you can hear that he's like hurling out expletives from his mouth, and he feels like this is being done to him. Like, right, this is that he's being punished and he needed to get somewhere and he can't. And the obstacle now becomes like a problem rather than an opportunity. And I'm not saying that when people are highly traumatized, they have the capacity to make the decision whether or not they're going to be like the angry, irritable guy or the calm woman. But when we're not perceiving threat, which is when we're maybe we're in a car or we're just not getting our way, we can use those techniques to start to imagine what it would be like to have a different type of reaction. And sometimes we can behave our way into a new way of thinking, or we can think our way into a new way of behaving when we're not in that hypervigilance state.
Right. And something that comes to mind talking about that, because no, you're right. I mean, when someone's threatening to take away your kids, it's not the same as being stuck in traffic.
Absolutely not.
But what I kind of took from that analogy is, okay, they're both in traffic. They can't get out. They're there. That to me is sort of the radical acceptance part of when we're in these horrible situations in, post-separation abuse or going through custody battles or whatnot. And unfortunately, like for instance, right now in this moment, the family court system is what it is. In 3 seconds from now, 3 minutes from now, 3 hours from now, it's not going to be different. So now what? Now what are we going to do? And so to me, that was, kind of how I took that analogy is, okay, they're in traffic. They're in traffic. It's not changing in 3 seconds or 3 minutes, maybe in 3 hours, right? But right in that moment, what are you going to do about it? She's choosing to listen to music. He's choosing to, slam a steering wheel. And, and I think the audience gets it. It's like, so now what am I going to do? So a lot of it is, it's not just positive thinking, right? It's not just, it's bigger than that. And it's just taking back control of your life and realizing because to me, again, the abuser's kind of like the traffic. They're going to keep hurling traffic at you. So, now what are we going to do with that situation?
Absolutely.
So you make a comment too about, I'll just read sort of a phrase from the book. Regardless of what it is that you want, you will get it when the frequency of your thoughts is in perfect alignment with the frequency of your emotion. And you kind of said that at the beginning. So can you elaborate on that some more about the frequency of our thoughts and our emotion?
Sure. Yeah. And you can take this literally, figuratively, it doesn't matter. Results matter to me. So this is kind of a good way that I found to explain it. Oftentimes, what we're thinking and how we're feeling are out of alignment. So they're not on the same frequency, so to speak. What that means is if you're thinking, like, this is why positive affirmations don't work often, because if you are saying something and thinking to yourself, like in a mirror, let's say, I'm great, I love myself, I'm beautiful, all, whatever, and you feel not great, not beautiful, then basically what's going to happen is those two things are going to try to sync, and they're going to miss each other. They're not going to sync. They're not going to get into alignment. And so once they miss each other, what's going to happen is nothing's going to change. Absolutely nothing's going to change because you're out of alignment. You're out of mind-body alignment, right? And people think when I say emotion, I'm talking about the literal physiological responses that take place in your body during significant life events. I'm not talking about feelings. There's a difference between a feeling and an emotion. An emotion is a biological experience. A feeling is a subjective meaning we make around a biological experience. So we can say that we're sad, which is an emotion. It's a biological emotion. Every human being gets sad. But then around sadness, we can create a meaning of shame, and we can start turning into like moral emotions, right? Which aren't actually physiologically running in our body, but we can start creating meaning around the sadness, and we can introduce shame, low self-esteem, not feeling worthy, all of those things, right? So there's a difference there. But when we actually have one of those kind of like primary emotions, and it's not in alignment with what we're thinking, nothing's going to change. So we have to work to actually feel. We have to get on the emotional frequency, let's say, that is at the same frequency as the thought we're having. Because when those two things get together, that's when you start to feel empowered. That's when you start to feel in control. That's when you start to feel like you can actually make the decisions you want to make. And you do that enough times, and it creates a belief, which sits kind of unconsciously, in your autonomic nervous system, in your psyche, so that you no longer have to practice that alignment anymore. Now it's become an automatic process. So in the book, I also say, Carl Jung is a psychoanalyst, a very adept psychologist. He was a genius and very well-known name. He would always say, make the unconscious conscious. So what he meant was things that we're not aware are controlling us and governing us. We need to talk them out and surface them so that we know why they're affecting us. And then once we have that awareness, we can make some changes. But if we don't know what it is in the first place, it's really hard to do anything with it. In my book, I'm actually proposing the opposite. Instead of making the unconscious more conscious, we should focus on making the conscious more unconscious, because then it will operate all on its own and we won't have to do the work anymore. We can literally make conscious positive beliefs an unconscious process. So when we wake up in the morning, that's our autopilot versus all of those negativity and negative thoughts that we're naturally wired to experience.
I have so many comments. I'm not really sure where to start because so the autopilot, first of all, so important. I completely understand, grasp, comprehend, apprehend everything you're saying. And you're right. We have to. So for instance, maybe I'll give this example. It's been repeated to you forever that you're a bad mom. And when you hear that, and then maybe you start years go by, you start to look for, your brain starts to look for affirmation that possibly that's true. Maybe you forget, that your kid's pickup time was at 2 p.m. on Wednesday and they sat there for an hour before the office called. But, those are the real life things. And you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I am a bad mom. That you start to go on autopilot with that a little bit. And like you said, I don't even think that we realize it. So what you're saying is then we have to work hard to create new beliefs so that that is not triggered so easily. And so, sorry, I'm going to ramble here for a minute so I can get my thought down exactly. But if you can look for statements that are truly you, that really represent your truth, and then work to have the emotion, I want to talk about this too as a biological sort of event, to match that, then and you do that enough time, then the next time somebody says you're a bad mom, you don't have that. It doesn't take hold. You don't have that negative reaction to it because you've worked hard to match an emotion that is truly, I am a good mom. I feel pride when I think of my children. I think happiness when I think of the things that I've done for them. So is that sort of one example of a belief that you would work on, a negative belief, to then make it hardwired and put that as your new autopilot?
Yes. Once you think it's true and you feel it's true, then you know it's true. And that's why it becomes a belief. You have to think and feel it's true. You can't only feel and you can't only think. It has to be both. The example you gave was great for how somebody could get on the same frequency of a belief they don't desire. So looking for confirmation in the environment that I'm a bad mother because my ex is, trying to take my kids and is being really litigious and really aggressive in this proceeding, and keeps telling me that I'm a bad mother and keeps telling my kids that your mother's a bad mother. And then I was late for picking him up for school, like you said. And then the feeling that person would be having and the thought, if they're in perfect alignment, it will confirm it enough that they will just believe it and still stop contesting it. They'll stop challenging it. They will just accept it as fact. The emotional state you're in too when you're hearing these things. Like if she was having a really terrible day and was down and was really not feeling good about herself, and then someone says you're a bad mother, that thought, maybe I am, you could hear it one time and that could be enough to solidify that belief of I'm bad. And so we're trying to use our conscious effort to program our autopilot by repeatedly doing the opposite of what's going on in the autopilot, if it's a negative thing that we want to change.
Sure. And I'm just imagining all these scenarios in my head, because you take that same mom and she's home with her child later who's fallen down 3 times now and spilled their milk and broken something, and they come to her crying again and she's already stressed out and had a bad day, and she's thinking to herself, oh my God, I can't take my kid right now. And her next thought is, I am a bad mom. I can't even handle my 6-year-old right now because they fell down. But instead of thinking, oh my God, I've had a bad day. For some reason, this kid has cried nonstop. It's totally normal. And it's totally normal for me to want to go in the room and lock the door and stick my head under the pillow. That's completely normal. Like right. It's everyday life, with a young child. But, you can see where your thought process can take, there's a fork in the road, and you can go down where, oh my God, I am a bad mom. I can't even handle my child. Versus, oh my God, this is totally normal. And you know what? He's just a nightmare today, right. And so now I see, you said this at the very beginning of the podcast. You're like, when you sit down with people, they're shocked at the beliefs that they have that they didn't even know they had.
Yeah.
And that makes so much sense. So do you have any recommendations then because and I want to talk really quick too. You said an emotion is a biological event. And I think I'm going to say what you mean by it, and then please tell me what you actually mean by it.
Sure.
We actually release chemicals based on an emotion that we're feeling that has a physiological effect on our body. Am I in the right ballpark?
100%.
Okay. Yeah. And why is that good or bad or not, or just is? What is it about that?
Well, emotions are literally energy in motion. So when let's say that we're experiencing fear, things are going to happen biochemically in our body that initiates the fear, right? And fear is not a punishment. Fear is not showing up to say like, it doesn't want you to feel terrified. It's alerting you to something significant. And then it's going to send a signal to your brain based on what the situation is. So a fear response typically sends a signal up to your brain that becomes a thought of I'm in danger, or something's wrong, or, whatever. I can't breathe. And so fear should be welcomed in that sense, in the biological sense, because without it, we wouldn't know that person over there is probably not someone you want to keep walking towards because they could potentially, carjack you or rob you or something. We need that fear response. It doesn't feel good, but this is the response we see like when we're walking and like you see like a little lizard scurry away. They're not, there's no process of, I wonder if this person's like, okay, and I'll just stay here. It's just an immediate, get me out of here. I need to flee because they're having a biological experience that something's wrong. This could potentially be dangerous. And then they go in their autopilot and they scurry away. We do that too. It doesn't always feel like we're doing that because we have an intelligent brain and we have, all these thoughts and all kinds of other things that lizards don't have, where we can try to make sense of something. But that's happening whether we know it or not, that fear state in our body.
So how do we solve the equation? We have our thoughts with our emotions that create our beliefs. And we talked about being aware of the thoughts. So when you're having an emotion, a biological event, what steps do we take to try to change that emotion to match a thought, a better thought?
So there's a number of things you can do. The first thing is you have to bring to your awareness what you want to believe instead of what you believe. You have to do that. And the reason why you have to do that is because if you don't, then you're just going to default back to the automatic thoughts and beliefs that you have already been imprinted and are already, fixed in your system. So you need to figure out, well, what do I actually want to believe instead, right? What do I want to believe instead about everything in my life? What's going on with, if you're in a high conflict divorce, what do I want to believe about the outcome of that? What do I want to believe about myself and the outcome? What do I need to get in touch with in myself that I haven't felt in a long time? Maybe confidence is buried or self-esteem is buried. Those things don't go away, by the way. They don't just like evacuate. They're not accessible underneath all of, because they're underneath all the trauma. But those are some things you need to figure out and I always tell people, and there's an example in the book of this guy who he couldn't date to save his life, but he met all of his goals as far as becoming, a mixed martial artist. And I was like telling him over and over again, take that success formula, whatever you did to get in touch with the confidence and everything to like visualize an outcome and then create it. Use that same technique when you're trying to go into the dating world, because it's the same formula. It's just our mind separates it and makes it like this impossible and this possible. At one point, this was impossible too. Think of all the things we do all day that were impossible at one point. Tying your shoes, brushing your teeth, those little things that we take for granted. We didn't know how to do those things always. We put in the reps, and now there's probably, you don't even have to think when you're brushing your teeth or tell yourself to walk over to the sink to pick up your toothbrush and brush your teeth. You don't have to do any of that. That's completely automatic because your body and your brain believes that you know how to do that, and no intervention is needed.
It's so interesting that you talk about that and how it becomes part of your autopilot, which some things are good. My daughter was learning to drive and she was driving every morning to school with me. And then she finally got her license and she drove to school one day, and she'd now done this trip dozens of times. Mm-hmm. And she came home. She said, I think something's wrong with me. And I said, what? She said, I don't remember driving to school this morning. And I said, oh, no, honey, it's okay. That happens to all of us. I said, it just means you have now done that trip so many times. Believe it or not, even though you're driving a piece of machinery that weighs hundreds of thousands of pounds that you could kill someone with, you actually don't remember operating it because you've now done it so many times that you went on autopilot. And she was like, whoa. Maybe I will take AP psychology next year, Mom. But that it is such a good thing for people to understand, because there's a basic thing we do every single day in our lives, but that is possible for you to change your thoughts and your actions if you practice enough. And so, for instance, I just want to bring another example in for this audience. So if we take one, and one example I have from a client is that her ex kept saying that she was a big spender. She'd been financially ruining the money because of her spending. That's why they don't have enough money in the bank. And that's why she can't leave, because they can't afford to get a divorce. And her spending, she started to believe it. And so we talked about what the truth was, which was, now she's actually the stable earner in her family. And what she spends money on is clothes, work clothes. And she does like to travel on family vacation. So that's where she spends her money. So she spends it responsibly. She spends it on things that she deserves to spend it on. That's the new truth. So then she kind of came up with a visual of her just out shopping on vacation, and she has no guilt about it. In fact, she's so excited to go on this vacation. She worked really hard for it. She deserves it. It's exciting. Like she's supposed to spend money on this vacation. It's what life is about. And she tried to tie this new emotion to it. So is that basically at the crux? Is that a good example of what you're trying to say when you tie emotion?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great example.
And I wanted to give that because again, this group I'm working with now, you guys, if anyone out there listening, if you really think about what those negative beliefs systems are that have been imposed on you, or if you really dig deep and think about what the negative belief systems are about yourself, then Dr. Salerno, if I understand, if we can use some visualization, if we can think about what we really want it to be, if we can think about how we'd feel if we had that awesome outcome, and repeatedly practice that over and over.
We use something called imaginal exposure when we're doing EMDR, which is a trauma therapy, proven very effective for healing all kinds of trauma, including like pathological relationship abuse.
And tell me, what's the name of it again?
Imaginal exposure. So imaginal exposure essentially means you're using your imagination to expose yourself to something. And so we use it during EMDR because we want people to put themselves back into the scene or the memory or the experience that they want to desensitize. So in the belief equation, though, I flip that and I say, well, we can use the same technique to enhance something we want to happen rather than desensitize something we don't want to feel anymore. So that imaginal exposure is, picture a scene where you're basically everything is in alignment with how you want it to go, like it's an ideal outcome. And oftentimes to get your emotions jump started, because sometimes that's difficult for people to just sit and feel good when they're feeling horrible, I usually ask them to recall a time in their life where they can recall a memory where there was absolutely no negativity whatsoever, just anything from any point in their life. And then imagine that first and see how that feels. That usually can get people in touch with the feeling part. So then once they're on board with the feeling part, and like you said, that biochemistry changes when you have an emotion, then you can start thinking about the image that you want to have. And that can create that alignment of the emotion and the thought, which can eventually become a belief. And you can practice that. You can mentally rehearse that like less than 5 minutes a day, and eventually it's going to turn into an automatic process.
Thank you for that. That's, gosh, exactly. I guess what I was looking for is, how do you prime your body to channel that emotion when you're so stuck, trapped in that cycle, fear, anxiety, whatever it is. And so that is great. So, okay, did everybody here find a time in your life when you felt that joy, that freedom, whatever it was? Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're doing the opposite there. Thank you for that. I will have this book in the show notes, as well as I want you to talk a little bit about your new book.
So this is called The Nature and Nurture of Narcissism, and Understanding Narcissistic Personality Disorder from the perspective of gene-environment interaction. Here's why I think this is important for your audience. This is going to tell people what they were dealing with using scientific evidence, not pseudoscience and popular opinion from the internet, because it seems like everybody thinks they know how to define what a narcissist is. And that is very confusing and disorienting for victims of narcissists. So this book is going to use nothing but empirical data to show what causes narcissism, how it develops, it dispels all of the myths, and then it tells you what kind of abuse you suffer as a result of it. That's specific, because trauma from narcissistic abuse or pathological relationship abuse or post-separation abuse is different in the nervous system and in the brain from other typical traumas that would create PTSD. So I have a chapter on that too. I would say what's really cool is I would say this book will complement the belief equation, because once you know what, then this will give you some how. And so I was really, really excited that you wanted to talk about the belief equation, because it just seems like it was perfect timing.
That is perfect timing. And oh my God, again, you're speaking my language. I love the idea of you understand the what, so then you can do the how. That will be in my show notes. Order it and make sure that you read this before you read the belief equation. You can get both of them on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, I would read the nature and nurture of narcissism.
And then you can apply it in the belief equation.
And then you can find some techniques in the belief equation to kind of heal that sort of dissonance that is created when you're in these really difficult relationships.
Okay, everybody. So if you are watching the YouTube version of this, you can see the nature and nurture of narcissism by Dr. Peter Salerno that just came out and is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Dr. Peter Salerno, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was super helpful, and giving everyone tools that they need to make their day and their lives better is so important. And so I really appreciate you. And again, we have a lot more to talk about, so you need to come back.
I would love to come back. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you again. We'll talk soon.